Okay, so this is the actual reading of the historical snapshot, a Byzantine Empire close reading investigation. So if you want to listen to it, go ahead. If you want to read it on your own, that's totally okay too. So if you look at the top, you're going to see some important people. You're going to see the map of the actual area. Okay, so these are divided into subsections. Now, if you remember, a subsection is a small part within the big piece of text, and they're going to have subtitles, right? So, the first section, a divided church creates opportunity. With the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 CE, the church emerged a divided entity both geographically and in methodology. To the west, most of Europe and its kings held fast to the Pope and the traditional Christian statues. However, the divide left the East with the opportunity to morph into something more accepting of outside influences and change. At its height, the eastern region, including Greece, Turkey, Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and the rest of the Mediterranean, northern Africa. Constantinople, located on the Bosporus Strait, which, if you remember, we talked about that, and you actually, not really, we didn't talk about it, but you found it on your map that you completed last week. So you should kind of have an idea, or if you need to, go back to that map and look at it. And situated atop the ancient Greek city Byzantine, became the center of the Eastern Christian world. It offered a gateway for trade between Europe and Asia, natural defense barriers from the Mediterranean and the Black Seas, and a powerful duet of leaders to shape into a thriving Byzantine empire it would become. Okay, so there's a lot of information in that first part. So it talks about when the Roman Empire fell, which was 476 CE. It talks about some people stayed with the Pope and continue to practice Christianity, whereas others in the eastern half, they decided to break away. And this is where the Orthodox Church came from. And so then we have like the countries like Greece and Turkey and Israel that actually were part of that eastern region. Okay. It talks about Constantinople, talks about the Bosporus Strait, and it kind of brings together how the Byzantine Empire was thriving. Okay, so let's go on to the evolution of religion. So, okay, though the early Christian church tried to stay united, there were shifts of each half's interpretation of the Bible and the practice of their religion. In the West, the Pope stayed in spiritual power, and services were still done in Latin. Church and state were purposely kept separate, leaving the government to the kings of their respective countries. Germanic, I think that's how you say it, influences continued within the Holy Church, and the Western priests remained unmarried and celibate. So basically, for those people who are not Catholic, in Christianity, the priest and the Pope, who are heads of the church, were male, and they were allowed to take the I don't want to say law, but I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but they basically had to stay celibate, or they could never get married and have a family. Alternatively, in the East, holy men chose to marry and have children, and they instead used their ancestral Greek language for services. When Constantine, the first ever Christian king of the Roman Empire, built his great capital city in East Constantinople, he intended to combine church and government. The ruling emperor in the East resigned supreme in both church and government and appointed a patriarch. But unlike the Western pope, this patriarch considered himself equal with the other bishops of the faith. These subtle differences remained acceptable for hundreds of years, But eventually, in the 1000s, a disagreement arose. In short, the East was offended that the Eastern Church officials were not even considered in a new pope appointment. This disagreement would be known as the Great Schism, or the Great Split, and it strained the church, formally dividing into the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches. The word Orthodox means in agreement with the right belief. The people of the early Byzantine Empire truly sought to uphold this, making their religious practices a daily occurrence. Wealthy Byzantine citizens sponsored monasteries to care for sick and poor. Byzantine built grand churches and decorated them with art and other luxuries. Even as the Byzantine Empire grew in wealth and power from their prime location on the trade route between Europe and Asia, the Western Church felt threatened. Power struggles and concern about worshiping icons, painted images used for religious meditation rather than God, created further division. Okay, so basically, a big part of this was religion, right? So there was two thoughts on religion. One was on the Western side was still the idea of Christianity. The Pope was head of the church, and they were unmarried. They didn't have a family. Whereas in the Orthodox or the Eastern churches, they were more I guess I want to say liberal is the word that comes to my mind of modern day, but they were more, um, I guess, less strict maybe. And they did get married and they did have families. So it created a real division between, and that's where we came to have this schism, which is the Great Schism, which was the split. And this is where we came to having Orthodox or as well as the Roman Catholic Church. Okay. A passionate emperor with a strong queen. Of all the emperors of the Byzantine Empire, sorry about that, Justinian is the one of the most revered. He ruled equally with his wife Theodora, a wise and cunning empress and the most trusted advisor from 527 to 565 CE. He had a deep-seated thirst for gathering the Roman Empire back together after its dissolution. Now, think about what dissolution means, because you're going to see this in your questions. Dissolution comes from the word dissolve, right? And you've probably used dissolve in science, or you've heard it's a verb, right? Dissolution's a noun form of it. But think of what happens when you dissolve something, and that'll help you with one of your questions. So, with this in mind, he sent his army to recapture Rome. And as he did, he also took possession of Italy and the countries of the entire Mediterranean coastline. In addition to his love of the Roman Empire, Justinian also prized the law and the church. Justinian and Theodora commissioned lawmakers and scriptural scholars to study and analyze the Roman regulations in order to purge unchristian laws and simplify confusing ones. Other laws were extended or added, including women's property rights, encouraged by Theodora, and the banishment of corrupt government policies. Then he had the laws organized into an effective legal system known as the Justinian Codes. These codes have influenced some of the Western law systems, and some are still in effect today. So when we look at this from what we've read in this section, basically Justinian and Theodora, I mean, she was basically like our modern day first lady, but she really had a hand, or she worked with Justinian to come up with laws and to actually help with ruling. Okay, spiritual building. Not only did Justinian and Theodora create justice and peace with their realm, but they also sponsored many building projects. The Hagia Sophia, or it might be Hagia Sophia, was one of the most glorious projects, the grandest of churches built with high golden domes. It served as a model for dozens of additional churches erected. Each was luxuriously furnished and decorated with epic art, such as mosaics tiled with glass, gold, and jewels, and painted images of Jesus and the Holy Mother, Mary, as well as massive murals that span the ceilings and the walls. The rich environment meant to remind Christians of what entering the kingdom of God would be like. So now we talked a little bit about touching on architecture. So probably if you've taken art this year or you've taken art in the past, Mrs. Rank or maybe Mrs. Klink have talked about mosaics, and they're basically using like glass or tile, and you create pictures out of them. Okay, and they're very stunning. I've done them before with like old tile that I had, like this, they call it subway tile, and it's kind of a little bit glossier, but that's one way you could make a mosaic. So, squashing the rebellion. In 532, Justinian's enemies, stirred up a massive riot that burned and damaged Constantinople. Justinian considered running from the rebellion, but his wife's firm faith and encouragement helped him successfully muster his army. They crushed nearly 30,000 enemies in the Hippodrome and took back the city. Strong leadership dies. Soon after Justinian's death, the Byzantine Empire began its slow decline. Without his passion for his grand city and the Roman Empire, lesser leaders allowed outside influences stemming from trade with Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe to mingle within the Constantinople's Greek roots. The society morphed, though they considered themselves to be Roman citizens. Finally, after several failed attempts in 1463, the Muslim Ottoman Turks took possession of the great trade city. The Turks, led by Sultan Mehmed II, were aided by cannons, a new invention, and Janissaries to capture Constantinople. Janissaries, I think that's how you pronounce it, are young Christian boys that have been captured, trained as military, and converted to Islam. The Turks renamed the capital Istanbul, transforming the Hagia Sophia Church into a mosque. Today, Istanbul stands as a destination rich with history, claiming both Christian and Muslim roots. Okay, so that's our article. We kind of talked a little bit as we went along. So now what you're going to do is, and I'll just click back over real quick to remind you, but if you're watching this, now you're going to go ahead and you're going to complete these 10 questions, okay, using this document. So, and if at any point you can't find an answer and you need help, please let me know. And I hope this helped. You don't have to listen to this video or watch it, but it may help you when you're reading. So, have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.